Welcome again to Joe Stun Unboxing. Last week I had an almost surreal experience. I was on one of Boxing Beats and Rhymes hangouts, and we were just chatting, and one of the guys who was there, Bruce Gass, really lovely fella, American guy, older gentleman. He's got his own channel, Bruce Gass. He does some great lives as well if you want to go check him out. Fantastic. He invited onto the panel, if that's what you want to call it, none other, out of the blue, than Tim Witherspoon, two-time heavyweight champion of the world. So suddenly we go from just being a bunch of boxing fans shooting the breeze to having a world-class, the former world title holder, heavyweight champ. And of course it was, what the hell's going on here, and it was just absolutely fascinating to listen to Tim talk about, everybody from Mike Tyson to Muhammad Ali. Beats and I are of a certain age where we remember Tim fighting Frank Bruno, and he talked about that fight, the big overhand right that he landed on Frank and eventually knocked him out. And Tim was absolutely fascinating to listen to. I mean, all these stories, it's like, I thought I'd gone to heaven. What the fuck's going on here? I just came over to hang out, and suddenly I'm talking to, Tim Witherspoon. It was a fantastic listen. And thanks to Bruce for inviting him on, of course, But Tim did say one thing that really struck me, stuck in my mind. Afterwards, I was thinking about it, and that is that he said he was talking about Emanuel Steward, and Tim is very, very opinionated on how you should train fighters. Like I asked him how he would have fought Usyk and how he thought Fury should have fought Usyk, and he went into the details, and he was quite critical of Sugar Hill. He said Sugar Hill, he stopped short of saying he's not a very good trainer, but he kind of strongly implied it. He said he doesn't really know, he hasn't really been there, he doesn't really know what he's talking about, sort of thing. And then the subject of Emanuel Steward was raised, and he said Emanuel was a tremendous offensive trainer, teacher, but couldn't teach defensive skills. Now, I thought that was a curious thing to say. I didn't say anything at the time because, who am I, you might say, to sort of argue with Tim Witherspoon? But there is one fighter in particular that I think might disagree with Tim on that, and that is Wladimir Klitschko, because Wladimir suffered very bad were they back-to-back defeats? I know they were knockout defeats in a short period of time anyway. Lamont Brewster knocked him out. Corey Sanders knocked him out. He'd also be previously stopped by a journeyman whose name escapes me. Very good quality journeyman, but he stopped him. So he had 3 knockout defeats, 3 stoppage defeats on his record. And he'd be knocked flat by Brewster. Brewster just killed him. Well, Sanders levelled him out as well. So he clearly didn't have a great chin, and defensively he was lacking, Wladimir Klitschko. So who did he hook up with? Manny Steward. And Manny basically rebuilt him from the floorboards up. He kind of deconstructed him and put him back together again, with an emphasis on protecting the chin, because clearly the chin wasn't great, and being able to shut down an offense. Now, if you look at Wladimir Klitschko's fight with Sam Peter, he was on the floor, I think, 3 times. And a lot of the time, he wasn't being hurt. He was just clipped. And he was so apprehensive about being punched because of what had happened to him before. It was almost like, boxing version of PTSD. He was going on the floor. Not because he was hurt, not because he was stunned, not because he was buzzed, but because, I've been clipped and, so I'll go down. But he won that fight. And from then on in, as we know, and Wladimir never had a great chin, but he was able to protect it using techniques that Emanuel Steward had taught him. And I think, probably Wladimir Klitschko would disagree with Tim Witherspoon with regards to whether Emanuel Steward could teach defensive nous. Also, if you look at Lennox Lewis, now Lennox certainly, you see, Lennox, to me, during his first reign, he was nowhere near the finished article when he had that WBC belt. Then he lost it to McCall, and he only came into his own far later, far further down the line when he got with Steward. And part of that, although he was a very offensive-minded fighter, and Steward, I was actually talking to Lee from Inside the Distance Boxing, and he made a good point. He said that in fact, Steward would teach defensive skills to the point where, come fight night, and he did this with Lewis a lot, he was saying to Lewis in the corner, go and get him, be more offensive, be this. I mean, because Lewis did improve his defense under Steward. If you look at the fight, I mean, he'd been knocked out by Oliver McCall. Eventually he was knocked out by Rockman, knocked flat, but of course that was more a case of arrogance, I think, on Lewis's part, and he'd been shooting Ocean's 11, the film, and he hadn't prepared himself for the altitude of South Africa and so on and so forth. So he kind of brought that on himself. But there's no doubt that defensively, okay, he was an offensive fighter, and Steward wanted him to use all those physical attributes, that range, all those rangy offensive tools that he had. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that defense was ignored. Certainly, if you look at the fight, like, for example, the one with David Tua was a huge puncher. I mean, whatever his technical limitations, he could bang. And Lewis just completely shut him down. Not just, using I mean, a lot of them were defensive techniques. But he wasn't cavalier about it. It wasn't a case of go out there and just chin him. I always remember, what was it, Pepe Correa saying to Lewis during the McCall fight, go out there and knock him out. And of course we know what happened there. The opposite happened. He got knocked out. But Pepe Correa was really just a cheerleader. Steward was a proper trainer. So I don't know. Would I agree with Tim Witherspoon that Emanuel Steward couldn't teach defence? Who am I to argue with Tim, the two-time heavyweight champion of the world, the man who knew Muhammad Ali, and talking to him was great. I mean, listening to him was fantastic. It really was. But on this particular point, I'm not so sure. About this. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think about this? Do you have an opinion? If so, leave it below in the comments section. And of course, as always, thank you for your time. Subscribe to the channel if you do, and please hit the like button as well. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. I always appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.